Hello everybody. I'm going to try and make a really short video on using the apply function in R and specifically using a custom defined function within apply. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just create a little data set the same way I often do in these videos, just for the sake of creating a data set. And then I'm going to illustrate really quickly the easy way to understand how to use apply in case it's new to you. So the basic idea here is that you're iterating over, in the case of apply, you're iterating over the columns, the rows, or the elements of some data, in this case a data frame. You specify the data set in the first argument. The second argument, you specify whether this is going to be operations over the rows, the columns, or the elements in the data set. And the third part is a function to apply to the rows, columns, or elements over which you're iterating. So in this particular case, what I'm basically saying is imagine we have a data set. We do. We've got a data frame. It's got 20 rows and 3 columns. So 20 records, 3 fields. And I'm telling it, I want you to iterate over the columns, which is what the 2 means. The 2 means iterate over the columns. So work over the columns. 1 would mean work over the rows. And then the function I'm going to apply is sum. So what it's going to do is it's going to create a vector of 3 values, and we'll just run it to illustrate that, that represent the sum of each column. Now if I switch this to 1, it would sum up across rows. And I'd have a vector of 20 elements because there are 20 rows. And if I were to put, and if I were to go like this is one way we can iterate over the elements in the data frame. In this case here, well, it's not going to do anything, but because it's iterating over the elements, but which means it's summing each individual value. It's not actually doing anything because it's summing itself. Each value is being summed with only itself, so it doesn't actually produce anything. But that's how this works. So that's the basic use of apply, and there are lots of examples of that online. What I really wanted to show you was how to include user-defined functions in apply. And there's a lot of ways to do it. I think the simple way to do it is to first think of the function. In this case here, this is a little function that's just summing up the square difference between an element and the mean of the either row or vector of that common to that element. So if we look here, this function will take the square difference between each one of these values and the mean of all of the values in the column, and do that for each column. So that's a user-defined function. You don't actually need to define this. It's the kind of functionality that's already in R, but I just want to show you. So that's using the function. And if I, just to show you how it works, if I use this function, I put in this vector xx, I will get the sum of that, the squared sum of that column, right? Because I give it this value, and I put that in there. Okay. Now, if, okay, so that works. Then the question is, well, what if I want to use it in apply? So I want to take that function and actually want to use it in apply. Well, here instead of specifying the sum function, which is embedded in R, I'm using the sum of square difference function. So that's all I'm doing is I'm substituting the name of this user-defined function in there. And then what I'll do is do the same thing as I would for any use of apply, or the standard use of apply. I put the function name in, and it does it. And in this case, it generates the vector of the squared sum for each one of those columns. If I did the same thing here, I could shift it to rows, do the same thing, and I'll get a vector of 20 values now. And that's the basic use of the function. Now, you can, very often, if you're looking at R code, people will include these user-defined functions in line, right inside the apply function. And this can get a little bit awkward to look at, but it's more elegant if the functions are small because you can put it all in one line. So in this case here, I'm taking the sum of the square of the values, in this case, of each row. So squared sum of each row, I get 20 values, which represent the squaring, the sum the squaring of the sorry, the sum of the values in the row squared. And that's what I've got, these 20 values here. And I can do the same thing if I want to do it by column. Again, but instead of using a 1 as the second argument, I change it to a 2. So it's the same idea here. And I run it, and I get the same thing. So it's taking these, it's summing up the values in the column, and then it's squaring it. And that's what I'm getting. And in this case, the function is inside, it's in line. And this is the standard format for applying a function like this within the R function. Okay, and that's all I wanted to show. So the basic idea here is to show you how apply works, which you may already know. And if you've never done it before, this is a couple of ways you can include a user-defined function by defining the function just outside and then making a reference to it, or an inline or inside the function, which has a specific way of annotation. First, you have to write it out a specific way, but this is basically how it works. You call the function, and in the brackets here, you're putting the x, which represents basically a placeholder for the either row or column that you're going to be iterating through. And then here's the actual function being applied to that row or column that you're iterating through. All right, hopefully that's helpful. Thanks. Bye.